A high-end private country club is supposed to represent comfort, prestige, and discretion. But for one general manager, exclusivity was never about tradition, it was about deciding who looked worthy enough to step through the front doors. A woman in simple dark jeans, a plain black turtleneck, and flat leather riding boots walked into the grand lobby of the city's most exclusive golf and country club. She quietly asked to inspect the main dining room's private terrace for an upcoming event. The manager took one look at her boots, offered a thin, practiced smile, and informed her that the main dining room was strictly reserved for full equity members. He gestured instead toward the public cafe near the golf pro shop. What he didn't know was that the woman he just quietly dismissed had signed the final closing documents less than 2 hours earlier, making her the sole owner of the land the entire golf course and club sat on. Before we get into the full story, comment down below where you are watching from today, and subscribe to Silent Empire so you never miss an episode. Now, let's get into it. The Oak Ridge Country Club had stood on the northern edge of the city for over 40 years. It was an institution built on old money, private handshakes, and an unwritten rulebook that dictated everything from dress codes to acceptable eye contact. For 12 of those years, the club was managed by a man named Julian Vance. Julian prided himself on what he called protecting the atmosphere. In practice, that meant he personally patrolled the lobby, intercepting anyone whose appearance didn't immediately broadcast six-figure disposable income. What Julian never bothered to understand was the financial reality of the club he managed. While membership dues kept the lights on, the club didn't actually own the 300 acres of prime real estate it sat upon. The land was leased from a private family trust, a lease that was due for renewal after 40 long years. Enter Clara Vance. No relation to Julian, though the shared surname would later prove to be a bitter coincidence. Clara was a commercial land strategist who specialized in acquiring high-value ground leases. She lived modestly, avoided flashy designer logos, and believed that real power never needed to raise its voice. Over 7 years, Clara's capital firm had quietly bought up the underlying debt and land rights of struggling luxury properties across the state. At 3 p.m. on a quiet Tuesday, Clara walked through Oak Ridge's polished oak doors. She had no appointment, no security entourage, and no diamond jewelry. Just a leather portfolio under one arm and a pair of mud-dusted riding boots from a morning field inspection. She walked toward the concierge desk to request a view of the grand terrace, the central jewel of the property. Julian Vance intercepted her before she reached the counter. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Julian said, his voice dripping with smooth, practiced formality. "Can I direct you to the Pro Shop Cafe? The main clubhouse area is restricted to active members and their invited guests." Clara paused, looking at him calmly. "I'm aware of the rules. I'd simply like to take a look at the terrace layout for a moment." Julian's eyes drifted downward, taking in her dark jeans and simple jacket. A small, patronizing smirk touched the corner of his mouth. "I'm sure you mean well," Julian said, leaning in slightly as if sharing a gentle secret. "But our dress code strictly prohibits denim in the main dining quarter. Furthermore, events on the terrace require an active sponsorship from a board member. The public cafe around the corner is far more flexible for walk-ins." Clara didn't blink. "I'm not a walk-in, Mr. Vance. And the dress code policy section 4 allows casual attire during non-service maintenance hours." Julian's smile stiffened. He was unaccustomed to non-members referencing the club's private bylaws. "I have managed this facility for over a decade, ma'am. I decide what is appropriate for our grounds. Now, I must ask you to step toward the exit before I have security assist you." Before Clara could reply, the heavy glass doors opened, and 3 men in tailored business suits walked briskly into the lobby. Leading them was Arthur Pendleton, the long-standing president of the Oakridge Board of Directors. Arthur looked pale, holding a thick leather folder. He stopped dead in his tracks the moment he spotted Clara standing near the entrance. "Clara!" Arthur called out, quickening his pace and completely ignoring Julian. "My apologies, the board meeting ran over. We were expecting you directly in the boardroom upstairs." Julian stood frozen, his hand still half raised toward the door. "Arthur, do you know this woman? She was just attempting to enter the terrace in denim." Arthur turned to Julian, his expression shifting from anxiety to pure disbelief. "Julian, shut your mouth right now." "I beg your pardon," Julian stammered, his polished accent cracking. Arthur pulled a document from his folder and laid it on the marble counter between them. "Miss Vance isn't a prospective guest, Julian. Her firm completed the purchase of the underlying land lease at noon today. As of 12 o'clock, she is the primary landowner of this entire facility." The silence in the grand lobby was deafening. Clara turned slowly to face Julian, her expression remaining completely composed. "And as your new landlord, Mr. Vance, I believe my denim is well within acceptable limits for a site walk-through." Julian's face drained of color. His gaze flicked from Arthur's grim expression to the signature page on the legal document, where Clara's name sat in crisp black ink next to the property's deed. I had no idea," Julian whispered, his hands trembling slightly at his sides. "If I had known you were representing the trust." "If you had known," Clara interrupted quietly, "you would have treated me with basic courtesy, but because you assumed I was just an ordinary person who didn't fit your idea of wealth, you treated me like an inconvenience." That afternoon, Clara didn't fire Julian on the spot. Instead, she ordered a full operational audit of all staff interactions over the previous 5 years, specifically reviewing complaints from guests who had been turned away at the door. 3 weeks later, following the audit results, the board unanimously voted to restructure management, replacing Julian with a team focused on hospitality rather than superficial judgment. People who rely on appearances to gauge power almost always underestimate the people who build it in silence. Never judge someone's worth by the clothes they wear or the quiet way they move through a room. You never know if the person you're trying to dismiss is the one who holds the keys to the entire building. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button and subscribe to Silent Empire for more stories of quiet strength and sudden turns. See you in the next one.